The Full Exposure Podcast is brought to you by Metro Health, University of Michigan Health, and Dr. Peter Hahn, in appreciation of the creative and artistic visionaries who enrich our lives through cultural connections. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Full Exposure with me, your boy, Brian. Today's guest is Brie Stoner, an amazing recording artist, a podcaster, a writer, a mischief maker. And Brie and I have a brief and short history working together collaboratively on a music video I did about a year ago that I've linked to on our episode page. And it's quite something. That video is something I'm very proud of, and I hope you will go watch it on our episode page. It's for her recording collaboration, this group called Avila, that she does with her collaborative partner, Daniel Johnson. And she also does her own solo music projects as well. But I gotta say, if you've seen any of the portraits that we shot specifically for this episode, you probably have a good idea that the conversation is going to be extremely interesting, and it's going to be all over the place. Brie's one of the most vulnerable artists I know, and rarely have I ever worked with a person that arrives in my studio with concepts that are fully formed, that are brilliant, and just ready to go for the camera. And I got to say that my two working projects with Brie, one for this podcast and one for her music video, the creative effort and conceptual ideas are about 98% Brie, and I am pretty much a monkey pushing a button, which is a wonderful process to work through sometimes because I can just vibe off her energy, which is just electric, and she's fearless in front of the camera. And just check out the portraits. So I won't wax on too much about that, but you need to check out these portraits. There's a whole conceptual layer to the costuming and things that she brought to the studio that you should check out. And Brie, besides being a recording artist, is a podcaster. She's a writer. And you may know her from the globally popular podcast called Another Name for Everything that she co-hosts with Paul Swanson and the famed Franciscan priest and author Richard Rohr, who past guests have cited as a major influence on them, with Kent Dobson, as well as Rob Bell cites him as someone who's influential in their thinking around religion and spirituality and the universal everything. So she works regularly with Richard, and this podcast is quite amazing. It's got a ton of followers. It's a really interesting podcast. I've also linked to that on Brie's episode page. But aside from that, we talk about Brie growing up in my favorite country in the world after the United States is Spain. She grew up in Madrid and Zaragoza, and in this conversation, we break down a whole bunch of things, but the intersection of creativity and spirituality, her forthcoming solo podcast, which I cannot wait for, called Unknowing, and so much more. It's unbelievable. So, without me yammering on any farther, let's explore the bigger picture with recording artist, podcaster, writer, mischief maker. I can attest to that. That's she's some trouble in a good way. She's good trouble, as they say. Let's explore the bigger picture with my guest and friend, Brie Stoner. This seems a little quiet, and maybe it's because of my stupid hat.
No, it's a little quiet.
It's a little quiet?
Yep. The overall volume could come up a little bit.
Hey, this feels... Hey. Oh, this feels good. I like that.
You know when you can hear yourself really well and you start purring?
Oh.
When you're like, so I was thinking...
You always got to drop into it. You're like, hey, can you give me something or other? That'd be good. Look at that.
Damn.
Huh? That's what
Wow.
we're doing.
Wow.
All right, am I situated? Let me just see. 2 waters.
Do you have a particular geometric
Brie,
shape
if I'm off
you're trying to
at
create?
all, then this isn't working, and I start throwing stuff, and then
Got it.
it's embarrassing when it ends badly for the guest. And I'm like, get out of here.
I just really wish I had go-go gadget arms so that I could tweak it just like 10 degrees to the, and then
Where's Cameron?
just the whole
I'm
time.
not actually trying to sell boxed water. They do send me. They're nice. They send me
There you go.
free water, but a water sponsor comes along for real, they're gone. They are gone. No, just kidding. They're nice people. Cool, Brie Stoner. All right, so I don't even know where to start with you because I don't know. We met in a very somehow you reached out to me about
I did.
something.
Well, because I saw your insane photography through a friend.
Stop, yeah.
It's true. You always give lots of compliments to the podcast host right at the beginning.
Yeah, thank
This
you.
is my strategy.
It's working, by the way.
No, but I saw your incredible portraits, and I was in the midst of finishing up work on a record.
Yeah,
and
for Avila.
Yeah, and I was really excited about the opportunity to express it visually. It's one thing to sit down in the studio and create all this music, but
Right.
you don't realize how much musicians geek out over being able to express it visually as well. So,
Well, I liked it because you had a concept that you were trying to do, and it takes it back to these days where you don't. It's so much about singles now that there aren't these conceptual things where the artwork could tie into some larger theme abstractly to
right.
the entire album. So, well, anyway, we had coffee, and then we started. You didn't know I did video, and then you're like, well, maybe he can direct the video too, and then you just came with everything, and then I'm going to post everything. So for the audience, just a quick timeout because Brie does so many things, and we just did an incredible photo shoot for the podcast.
Yeah.
Which. Let's just start there. So Brie does a lot of different things, and I don't even, this is why it's hard. There's so many things I want to talk about.
It's a creative hurricane, essentially. So you just got to pick one disaster zone to go after.
Exactly. It's a category 5 too.
Legitimately.
It's not a 1 or 2 coming on shore. This is a full 5.
Oh, this is why I'm single. I'm not figuring it out. Okay.
We evacuated a long time ago.
Right.
So, no, so we did, that's really our first sort of creative collaboration. And I would say I took maybe 10%. You were 90% of the vision of just what you wanted to do with this music video, which again will be on your artist homepage. But that's when I had been aware of you for a while around town as a musician and a singer and a recording artist. And I always remembered your name, I think, from some of the Numas, or you did a little scoring or something with Rob Bell's.
I did.
Things like that. So
Yeah.
I always had your name, and then I think it's your cousin cut my hair for a while, Ben. So Ben was there, and I'd get like little snippets of information. I was like, isn't Brie her? I don't know. I thought that you were sister or brother, sister, siblings. And then he's like, no, that's my cousin. And interesting
Did he
stoner
say it
family.
like that, though?
Yeah, he was mad about it. He was not happy about being cousins.
That's my cousin. Damn that woman.
It was, yeah. No, Ben, another creative. He's maybe not a full category 5. He's maybe a 2 or 3, but he's still
The Stoner clan, I tell you what.
He still will cause some destruction, which is
That's
amazing.
fair.
So I don't know. So I've never had this quite with a guest that I know, and I'm not sure which angle to take for the podcast because you have so many things going in some things. But I want to take it because I'm very interested and have always been in Spain, and I know that you grew up there. You're bilingual, and now I found out you speak French and singing in French now. I don't know. I feel inadequate about it because I feel like you dropped that kind of subtly, like, oh, yeah, I'm singing in French now, too. And I'm like,
You know what? I said this to my mom, and she's like, why the hell are you singing in French? I was like, because it just feels so good to speak French in the mouth. Like, just doesn't it feel good? And she just looked at me, she's like, you are so strange. But it's the thing about language, which is that we can communicate different things in, through different languages. And, certain things I can say in Spanish, I cannot find a replacement for in English. And so maybe in some ways it's the perfect metaphor for us in this conversation, because it's like part of the reason why I feel drawn to so many different mediums is because there's so many different ways of expressing things. And I feel most at home in myself when I am, bilingual, when there's a multivocality of expression happening in my life. But with Spain in particular, I think having a childhood overseas and in Spain really shaped me a lot. I think the terrain, more than anything else, the culture, the energy, it's just such a guttural, like ballsy, sensual, beautiful culture.
Yeah.
And
how did you come to be in Spain, and what regions or cities did you primarily sort of come up in?
So my parents were missionaries there, and they were saving the Catholics from hell, which worked out really well for us. Obviously, we were extremely successful.
Well, there's no more Catholics. That's great.
It's just, they were trying to figure out why that happened. It was the Stoners. In all seriousness, though, they came to Spain in the early 80s. So right after I was born, we went there when I was, 7 months old or so. And they were working with the Spanish government trying to create anti-drug programs. So at first we were in Zaragoza, which is up north, and then we went to Madrid. And most of my childhood was spent in Madrid. And they worked with the Spanish government doing these, youth tournaments, and they opened a youth center. My mom worked a lot with, a lot of members of our community were AIDS victims and were not being cared for by the hospitals, by the nurses. So that was a part of my mom's, ministry.
Yeah.
So even though I grew up with this kind of like really restrictive Baptist theology, the example of my parents and the way that they lived in embracing other cultures and embracing other people, and embracing art as well. They were both just avid, art fans.
Yeah.
So even though we were dirt poor, we would travel around in our little Volvo and go to all of the art museums and see as much of the exhibits as we could and travel through Europe as we were able to.
Well, that's amazing. And I'm wondering, were you immersed in Spanish culture schools and those things too? So that's a huge up, right?
Yep.
So you're not just at some school for American kids.
And that was really, it was controversial for my parents to make that decision at that time. And people, this was pre, now Spanish immersion and raising kids bilingually. It's like we have all these studies that show the benefits of that. At that time, it was like, oh, your kids aren't going to know how to speak English and read in English. And what are they going to do when they get to college, Yeah. But they were so committed to embracing the Spanish culture and becoming part of culture that my brother and I went to Spanish public schools, and we thought we were Spanish.
Why would you?
Yeah,
you just
to
want to
this day.
assimilate as a kid. You just want to be a kid.
Right.
So,
but especially, my first language was really Spanish. English was spoken at home so that we would, learn. But, when you're in Spain, when your childhood is surrounded by a specific culture, there's a phenomenon now that describes, it's called third culture kids. When kids grow up, military or missionary kids grow up in another culture, but they realize they're not, native.
Yeah.
But because you don't really belong to one or the other, you belong to both. And it creates a different kind of sense of place in the world when you grow up with that kind of fluidity.
Yeah. Were you, I'm assuming because kids take to languages like crazy and their immersed culture at school or whatever, were you fully immersed? Did you feel normal? Did Spanish kids look at you as an American girl or more of a Spanish girl?
They never believed I was American. In fact, when I think I was in third grade, when I finally paraded half the class to our little apartment building, buzzed, my mom to bring down my passport so that she could show it to them because they just didn't believe it,
Right.
We were just part of life there. So, and if I get angry enough during this podcast and start swearing, you'll understand. In Spanish, you'll hear the Castilian accent.
Coño, mierda.
Me cago en la hostia de verdad, ¿eh? ¿Será
Hostia,
posible?
es the one.
¡Qué gilipollas!
We won't bleep that out because there's not any reason to for this local audience. But but I've spent a lot of time in Spain. I had an exchange sister live with our family when I was a senior. She was a classmate and also lived at our house. And she's still my best friend to today, maintaining this 20, 30-year rate. I don't even know how long time, 30-plus year relationship. And I've now brought my oldest daughter over, and we traveled around Madrid a year ago, pre-pandemic. And then, so it's just a culture I've always wanted to be more immersed in. But I always had English speakers around, so I'm barely conversational in my Spanish. But it's a draw. It's a call, like it's a siren call. I can't wait to get back there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so they sort of adopted me. Informally. It's formally, informally, like as formal as you can get without pieces of paper. We're sort of like she was adopted by my parents, and I was adopted by her family, and her mom, who's 92 now, survived COVID. Her brother survived COVID, and Spain got hit so hard.
So hard.
Anyway, I can't wait to go back because I want to rush. I want all my daughters to meet Maria Jose, who's her mom, and she's 92 and the matriarch of everything and the sweetest woman on the planet. So anyway, we're going to get back at some point as soon as we can travel. But how do you think that informs? So now you're able to switch gears all the time between these cultures and languages, and creatively as an artist, what does that do for you or complicate things when you're trying to express? Because I think as an artist and as many layers as you express yourself through, as we saw today, wardrobe and character-driven characters in your music that you write, how you convey different characters and different moods and concepts, and even as a searcher and a learner through your podcast mediums and those conversations you're having, like, do you just feel like everything's coming at you all the time and you're trying to distill, or is it a more natural flow for you?
I think that's been the journey of the last several years of my life, is to learn how to see holistically, to see these disparate pieces of my life as belonging to one whole creative expression. And, it's really curious to me how in this culture we think that people find themselves or arrive in their 20s or their 30s. And I'm 38 and I'm looking at 40 and I'm like, thank fucking God. Like, I can see how much more capable I am of holding complexity and holding paradox, and not having to be forced, or even not forcing myself to choose between this or that, this expression or that, or over-identifying with one piece of it. An author I really love, Dorothy Sowell, says, the best women I know refuse the either or. And that feels like so much a part of my process these days, is to see, whether I'm parenting my kids as a single mom, or I'm meditating, or I'm studying the mystics, or I'm, writing music, or I'm dreaming about what to do on this photo shoot, to see it all collectively as one, resounding whole expression, like a symphony playing the same melody.
Well, I think these kind of as strands, maybe as a visual, but it's almost like a DNA model where it's all just sort of twisted and creates this unit, right? But it's all sort of intertwined in a way that is less picking and choosing. It's more just maybe channeling. And maybe that's... I have certain lanes that I go to, and not necessarily, I don't think, to the degree that some artists do or yourself does, but... Because I think part of what I'm always conflicted with, too, is it's one thing if I'm expressing, like, I think the biggest difference between where I'm at as a so-called artist and where you might be as a recording artist, or pick any medium that you're working with, is this commercial aspect. People are asking me to produce something that they need. And so it isn't like this pure expression. It's, I put in my input and my little twist and flavor on things. And then there's times I can do things just the way we want, like just the way I want, or I can just shoot something for myself, and that's a nice hybrid. But it's I always feel like I always have a bigger foot in the commercial, like, client world, and And I just feel fortunate to do anything artistic to make a living, because I wouldn't survive punching a clock or doing any of those things.
I mean, that's the gift, and my brother is a filmmaker as well, and he finds himself doing a lot of commercial work. And we talk a lot about, the gift, the privilege of being an artist in this world is that you have to find the ways in which you can make a living and do it with integrity so that you find meaning in what you're doing. And sometimes with some of the jobs, it's not like life-changing work, but then you find that you are relating deeply to the community of people you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that brings it, together. Yeah. That makes it feel worth it, because you're connecting kind of holistically with the people around you. But
yeah, and just to be clear, I wasn't saying that I'm unsatisfied in this commercial world. It's just that it isn't completely one fire hose of my own creativity. I have to mix and match. It's more like a chef. And
you've got clients, who have specific requests and things that they need, and you have to find how to meet them in that. Yeah, makes sense.
And find a middle. But just, but then how, when you came back to West Michigan, so how long were you in Spain?
My first 12 years. And then we came back to the States while my dad was finishing up his doctorate, and things didn't work out with the mission. So suddenly we left my home country, and it was just supposed to be like a little furlough. We were just going to be back in the States for a little bit. And next thing we knew, we were leaving the country that at least my brother and I felt was home. So it was quite a drastic shift to go from, Madrid to Valparaiso, Indiana. I mean, just like a slight whiplash, slight cultural whiplash.
No parachute, just enjoy.
All of a sudden you're in Indiana. But, we were there for a few years and then moved to Grand Rapids. And
what was the pull of the Grand Rapids? Just curious. What was? Obviously,
I think it was a teaching job that
Yeah.
my dad had at Cornerstone University. And then shortly after that, Mars Hill Bible Church was started, and he became really involved, and my brother and I got involved, and that's how we met Rob Bell. Was through that.
I don't know if you know, but I went to LA and we did a podcast. I went to his house, and then you came up briefly in the podcast as well, just like.
Oh, did you both talk shit?
Yeah, we totally trashed you on it. It was ugly. Don't ever go listen to that episode. But yeah.
I'm gonna have to listen to it. No, it's. As I look back, even in this conversation, it's amazing to see how progressively expansive the rungs of belief we're getting for not just for me, but for our family. And, even as we were a part of Mars Hill, and then after we left Mars Hill, it's only become more and more inclusive, our frames of faith, of what we believe in. So it's interesting to see that
it's
progression.
Funny because, growing up, there was a lot of, within Christian faith around here, it was, I grew up at Calvary on Denham, which was before Mars Hill. I mean, split off from Calvary was Mars Hill, and Rob went and started that church. And I grew up in that church, and it was very much, don't mix with Catholics, don't mix with Lutheran. I remember my parents would always, if I had a new friend, I'm talking like junior high, elementary school, what church do they go to? I'm like, I don't know. We're just trying not to, break our arms on our off our bikes and stuff.
Right.
And we're not really talking about, eternal damnation with each other all the time. So it is that culture that, but over time, my parents shed some of that. And I don't know, it was just the world becoming more connected and global in the 90s and 2000s, and they moved around a bit and were exploring churches. And then I married a Catholic, which is exactly what
dun.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're saying, it's so true, because we cannot ignore the reality that our worlds have become one world. We have become, especially with millennials and younger, it's like to grow up with the advent of the internet is to say that the ways in which we belong is shared. We find a shared sense of belonging. So if you're going to tell me that my friend is going to hell, sorry, peace, I'm out. Because, it's clear that our humanity has evolved quicker than our faith tradition's capacity to offer the same kind of cosmic, inclusive, positive, don't talk with your hands, Stoner, but even body positive, images, like a positive anthropology, instead of thinking things like, oh, you're, going to hell.
Well, Yeah, I mean, we could just talk about that, but it's, the one thing I'm less sure of is everything I've been sure of my whole life. And what I think other people are 100% convicted and sure of, like, there's cracks in all of it. And you just, if it comes down to this faith and you claim it and you shut everything out and you just, pray harder that, these things go away, like, it absolutely falls down. And I think the world as you experience it, and the more people, even within our own country, I'm not even saying you have to travel internationally, but if you're genuinely a curious person about humanity and humans, you can't be beholden to things that actually perpetuate in your mind these divisions that are eternal in the afterlife, that people are just going to burn forever.
Yeah.
And you're charged with running around telling them and inviting them to church, and hopefully they, say the magic words and become saved.
Right. Well, it's not all that different from like the political echo chambers that we find ourselves in, right? Because both of those things are fueled by the lack of humility that certainty brings.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, part of why I felt so interested in making a podcast called Unknowing and talking about unknowing, because I see it as the preamble to all creativity, but also the preamble to growth as a human being.
Yeah.
When we go through these periods where we have to unknow, unlearn, and unsay what we thought we knew so well.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. I hope I remember both because I'm not necessarily a great host. But they, a couple things is, you talked about religious entities, these frameworks and architecture of religious belief that perpetuate structure, political structure, financial structures, all these things. They are very slow to change, because if you move the line from what you said was a hard line, you start to evolve and lose credibility, and you're almost like you're saying this political audience, you're going to lose your hardliners. They're going to be like, where's the church? That's like when this pope came in and was very more liberal than the previous popes. It's got all the, conservative Catholics all crazy, and then other people are like cheering on all this acceptance and open the floodgates to a larger umbrella under what is a communion with God, right? So. But the other thing, which I forgot my other point, I knew I would. We're resistant to change, right? And the other thing is that I don't care what religion you belong to, and I think I'm getting back to the point, is when you're faced with life just absolutely smacking you around to the ground, there's no faith that will necessarily, it's going to be tested, and if you're going to this world of unknowing again, that's what you are so sure. It's like slipping on the sidewalk, right?
Yeah.
You can have the most beautiful great day,
right?
And the next second you're on your ass swiping snow off your shoes and your elbow hurts, and you're checking your body for broken bones. It's like that detour is such a blunt instrument, and I'm just wondering, for you as you've pivoted during these times where either you had challenges, has there been a particular source for you that has kept you bumped back onto the path of knowing more than when it became unknown?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the kind of knowing that I have learned to lean into is the knowing that comes more from the body, from experience. And the people who most illustrate that for me are the mystics and the artists. Mystics being, somewhat the rebels of all spiritual traditions who had these radical experiences of oneness with the divine God, whatever the term may be. But they have these experiences and then they translate them out to the public in a way that makes you realize we have that capacity all along for these kind of transcendent encounters. And it's not for the purpose of transcendence. It's not so you can bliss out in a cave and be like, I found it. I found peace with all, it's so that you can then be a force of creativity and love and change the world that we live in. There's a philosopher that I'm not a massive fan of, but his name's Ken Wilber, and he talks about the fact that it only takes 10% of a population shifting in consciousness for the whole to shift. And so I think of those mystics, those artists, those, as the revolutionary force at the edge of the 10%, trying to encourage humanity onward. So in my own life, when when I slip and fall on my ass, and I think for so many of us who have experienced this past year as that, the great halting of all of our plans, a giant reminder of our fragility as human beings, of our interdependence, of how much we need each other.
Yeah.
And months and months and months for many of us in isolation. I think it's learning how to become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's been my practice. Because when I can get into that space, I can trust that what's happening is an ever-becoming, unfolding story. It never ends here.
Right.
Just like I'm not going to limit you by, your story ending at a certain point because it's still unfolding. I can trust that my story is unfolding too. So the belief systems that can move dynamically with you in that way, I think are helpful gifts.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm not one of those people who thinks you should throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to religion or faith traditions. I think there are profound gifts to humanity in each of them. But to mine them, to find those that actually inspire you to become a better human, and to leave the institutional orthodoxy that is trying to imprison you into, a former culture, or an unhelpful body view or view of all bodies.
Sure. I
think that shit, we gotta grow out of that.
Yeah, it's every organization, I don't care if it's Catholic or Muslim, when faiths become so large, or it could be just the new church startup on the corner, like some whatever. It could be a brand new seed, of a church. It still has all the entrapment of humanity and our failures. It has greed. It has power, thirst for power. It has all the things we bring to our lives that make them complicated. And this isn't one thing you can just cast your, your entire faith on. It has to be more inward and more of it has to be more of an inward journey than I think, and this is not the way I was raised, but like just this way that you have to take these circumstances that you can give me a playbook, right? A church or religion can give you a playbook to play by when life does X, Y, or Z to you. But it's really, it's just, I don't even know the right word, but it's just not, it really becomes more of this exploration around the edges, the 10%, this other thing that actually then becomes to make more sense to you.
Right.
And there's so many things that don't make sense in the kind of American Christian conservative evangelical sort of world I came out of. It just does not make any sense to me, and I have rejected it for myself,
right.
And am on a very different path now that is complicated, but I don't think you ever get there, and I don't ever want to be so sure that I'm like,
yeah,
stop.
The way I've been thinking about this journey recently is kind of comparing it to Narnia. The story of Narnia, little girl goes to a wardrobe. The wardrobe is magical, spits her out in this new world. I think many faith traditions, and the creative process can be like this too. Many faith traditions have established a map to get you to the wardrobe, right? You're going to take the back stairs. Some people take the front stairs. No, you got to turn left. No, you got to turn right. And then once you get to the wardrobe, there's all these different camps of people camped out in front of the wardrobe, describing the details of the wardrobe. And some are arguing about whether there's 3 hinges or 2, whether the wardrobe door has a mirror, how tall exactly it might be. But at the end of the day, you have to have the courage to get in the wardrobe.
Right.
And then your maps to the wardrobe, it was useful to a point.
Yeah.
But now you're in Narnia. So you have to trust your own agency, your own divine becoming, your own manifestation of whatever it is that you believe in that offers you that greater meaning.
Yeah.
And become and do and be and create. It's a whole different energy than worshiping the map.
This really clicked for me, Brie, when you take that approach and you apply it to creativity, because
Totally.
it's the same part of the brain, right? It's the same. And I remember having conversations with people in my family about prayer, right? And it's like, what's the difference between prayer and meditation or fasting or whatever? It's kind of the same part of the brain that you're going to exercise to create this process that is either healing or calming or more appreciative or whatever your focus is. But talking about creativity and how you get there and the choices you're forced to make along the way, creative decisions could be within a project or within a song or within a poem or this podcast, just where we take this conversation and all of that. Those sort of decisions are important, and it's very much parallel to, but going in the same direction as a faith journey, I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's been where I have been integrating so much in my life, is recognizing the intersectionality of spirituality and creativity and social transformation. Because implicitly in all of them, there's a certain learning of what has been that is necessary, good work, right?
Yeah.
We need that to be adult, mature, conscious human beings. But if we don't then let go of what was in order to make room for what could be or what may yet be, we live with this, myopic imagination. And then we wonder why our world looks the way that it does. But to have the prophetic imagination, to fall into the wardrobe ourselves, whether that's on your faith journey or your creative journey, or even thinking about all of the transitions we're going through in our country and in the world, right? It's to fall into believing that there could be something better, that there should be something better, and that you yourself are an active participant, an agent that can do something about it.
Yeah.
And that's the fall into the new kind of, becoming space where you have that creative power to do something in this world.
These sort of ideas are sort of woven into your podcast that you've, so it's called Becoming?
No, it's called Unknowing.
Unknowing, sorry,
yeah.
Becoming. I think you should change the name because I
think Michelle Obama kind of stole that thunder.
Yeah.
She did.
Michelle.
Unknowing, yeah. So for the last couple years, just a little nobody. I mean, like nobody knows who she is. So maybe I should just take it.
I'm gonna Google her later. I don't want to ask now and be really ashamed that I don't know who she is.
I'm serious. She came out with that book title. I was like, damn it, Michelle. Damn.
She did it again.
But yeah, it's called Unknowing. And for the last couple years, I've had the privilege of being on a podcast with Richard Rohr called Another Name for Everything.
But explain who he is so if people don't know. I mean, he's a major thinker around the edges of Franciscan belief. He's been a huge figure in the wilderness for many of us who still kind of loosely have categorically held on to the term Christian. Yeah. And I say loosely because I think a lot of us are in some sort of post-Christian wilderness. But yeah, he's a Franciscan priest, or I shouldn't say priest. He's a Franciscan friar, teacher, author, has written dozens of books, and has a worldwide audience of people who are so grateful for his work. But part of what he has done is he's expanded the categories of belief for so many people, and he's really allowed us to think differently about how we could reconsider becoming or being Christian in a way that's more cosmically inclusive and supportive of other faith traditions as well. Kent Dobson was a guest on the podcast, and he cites him as an influence. I know Rob Bell does as well, but I think what he's been, and you can correct me if I've mischaracterized kind of this. For me, he's expanded what is human love and acceptance around the ideas, but not to distill your journey for faith or communion with God. Mm-hmm. It's actually opening your arms much more wide open to all of us around us, and get less caught up on these small landmines that are actually massive landmines for most people in most communities. Yeah. I don't know. What's a fair way to say his influence? How is he prodding? Maybe it's like, how is he, how is he criticized, by the voice? So that would tell us exactly where we are. If we start like, what are they saying about him? We know Rob Bell's the heretic, but
he's another heretic. Of course he is. Yeah. So people criticize Richard for touting an alternative orthodoxy, something that doesn't align with, Catholic Orthodox beliefs. When in reality, what he's doing is he is bringing a healthy critique to the ways in which we've interpreted orthodoxy to begin with. So he's historically brilliant and theologically so astute at pointing out, no, this belief in, in human beings as being fallen, here's when that kicked in. The idea that Jesus had to pay this atonement price, here's when that happened in history. And so what he does is he allows us to see that these are all human ideas and concepts, ways in which the church fathers were trying to make sense out of our faith tradition, and the way that he shares the evolution of the Christian faith, I think, gives a lot of people permission to question or let go of what is really not a very positive anthropology, not a very positive view of human beings. And I think his last work, he really with the cosmic Christ, the universal Christ, he is introducing the idea that Christ can be another name for everything, which is where we got the idea for the podcast title. And if you choose to see divinity that way in everyone, it changes how you interact. It changes your drive for social justice if you believe that every single living being is an expression of the divine.
Yeah, great. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I meant another name for everything. I wanted you to just sort of explain that, you're one of the three co-hosts with... Well, it's Richard. It's you and your co-host,
Paul Swanson.
Thank you. Are just kind of talking around a theme of ideas with Richard, and you're just sort of probing and amplifying your learnings as you talk to Richard.
Right.
And it's a really calm, meditative podcast, but it's called Another Name for Everything. But it has a wide reach. I mean, some idea of it's national, international audience, people who are seekers, especially around spirituality. I'm sure it has a very multi-denominational following.
It does. I think it in so many ways, because it's offering the world a more inclusive faith framework at a time when we're desperate for that, when we need it. We need it so that we can evolve how we arrange ourselves socially and politically, and how we think about politics, personally and collectively.
Yeah. So with your podcast coming out, it's not quite, and this isn't about product lanes, but it's like it's in the works, and I know you've recorded some things, but when it goes live, I'll update the show notes in case you're listening to this episode, not at the time it was released. But I'm excited about what you can bring within that framework, and talk about, like you were telling me just before our shoot, just kind of the ideas and subject matter that you want to probe and explore. It isn't all about religion necessarily, but it's about a journey of creativity and
exactly
how it intersects.
Yeah, I'm playing with the working subtitle of Unknowing would be something along the lines of a spiritual path of creative possibility. So whether you are an artist or somebody who's really committed to social change, this is the kind of conversation that I want to have, because I find myself at that intersectional place in which I want my spirituality to influence my politics. I want my politics to influence my art. I want my life to be lived from a place of deep meaning in service to beauty, not for the sake of beauty, but for the sake of what beauty can inspire in all of us, and how it can animate our courage, how it can make us feel more connected to each other and to this planet that we have a deep responsibility to treat in a completely different way. So, I'm hoping to have conversations with artists, with spiritual teachers, with social change makers, mischief makers, and try to create that tapestry for people so that, regardless of what it is that you do for a living, you can see the threads of change and feel yourself connected to them, and feel inspired to see your work as a spiritual practice, to see your relationships as part of your art. reframing how we interact so that everything that we do becomes more full, more animated, and more actively increasing our collective imagination.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how much the pandemic has helped you, in a weird way to say helped, but has
My
created...
dating life? It's
We're not going there. We don't have enough time. What I'm wondering is, in sort of strange ways, is there any silver linings as you're thinking about developing, this other form of communication via podcast on your own, even though you're part of this large podcast network, with Richard, that audience framework, I should say.
Yeah.
And then you're writing music, you're doing your own spiritual practice or meditative practice, whatever it might be. Has the pandemic, being a mom and all this other stuff, has it created unexpected pockets of focus for you that you would not necessarily be able to do if this hadn't arrested the world and slowed it down?
I think we can all look at this time and find something like that, Whenever business as usual is brought to a halt, there is always creative opportunity and potential. And I think in my own life, this tenure of a forced monasticism experience, I didn't really sign up for, but there it was. I was bouncing between two radically different experiences of quarantine and of the pandemic. On the one hand, I would have a week without my kids where I was completely alone, where I would sit on a stairwell and just lean my head up against the wall to just, feel what it felt like to be held, because it's just oh God. And then also, being a single parent. So it was this whiplash between, this really intense, homeschooling in the works and then being completely alone. But I think the opportunity for all of us, whenever we find ourselves in these states of complete stop, is to look inward and to do a lot of healing work, to have the courage to look at the unbeliefs that we have about ourselves and each other, and then to begin to make room for them to come up and out. And I think for so many of us, we've had this experience where all of a sudden we have time. I mean, imagine that. We're not running around like crazy like we used to.
Right.
And I hope that's a lesson that we'll bring into the future as a society. Americans, we're such workaholics. We're obsessed with this drive to be busy, but that's not the same thing as being creative.
Yeah.
So during this time, I think because of all of the healing work and meditation and being alone and then being with the kids, I did find myself in a place of a new kind of creative swell.
Right.
And started working on a new album over the summer and have been busy at that, recording and working with a new producer now. And we're sending each other files back and forth like all the musicians are doing these days.
Yeah.
And then, I found myself really hungry to have these types of conversations about unknowing, about being willing to let go of the mind's need for certainty and drop in lower into a more embodied and spacious way of, practicing creativity and love.
Yeah. In this sort of vacuum of everything not being business as usual, I sort of felt like, if you're on a motorcycle that vibrates a lot, you're still vibrating for an hour after you get off the motorcycle, right? Mm-hmm. And you're still, but then that dissipates and then there's this quiet that happens. But it takes a while to sort of get into the quiet again, and just really have this moment where you can change a lane so you can fully experience whatever creative process you're doing. If you were still running around like crazy, if you were still going into the office all the time, now you can do a couple hours of emails and then have a couple hours where you're just not responding to the emails and doing some things, these little pockets of time.
Yeah.
It's really got me thinking about what am I happy about? What am I most want to do?
That's it.
And I found out that I don't have to do all those things, even financially.
Right.
Just taking whatever.
So much of what I think we thought we needed or we thought was normal has come into question during this time.
Yeah.
And I think this is a great opportunity for us individually and collectively to reconsider our habits, around work.
Yeah.
And to rethink and reprioritize what slowness and spaciousness and a meaningful life can offer in lieu of the myth of success, of being successful, which we've, in this culture especially, equated with just making a shit ton and working, like a workaholic. And
got to get mine, stack it up.
Yeah, and it's like, I think the slowness has offered us a different rhythm. And in that rhythm, we're able to maintain a sense of connection to ourselves, to our bodies, to our relationships, and an increased sense of tender care.
Yeah.
Of recognizing that this is actually...
And I think that's why abstractly, like it almost feels, getting back to Spain and Europe, it almost feels like a slightly slower European sort of contemplative way to live, where you can have a 3-hour dinner in the midst on a Tuesday or Thursday night.
Right.
Where work tomorrow is not the most important thing. It's those 2 or 3 hours together as a family or with friends. And no agenda, just enjoying talking about cinema, talking about life, talking about politics, talking about whatever that is, and enriching each other just through presence, which doesn't happen. We all go here to our, little bubbles of activity that's very small and insular when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. And this is what presence gifts us with. Presence connects us to a state of abundance. And, I'm not Buddha beads and Tulum spiritual teachering you right now by saying that.
Can we go to Tulum? That would be awesome. We'd love to. It's about 8 degrees today.
I'm not, telling you to manifest. I'm saying that presence opens us up to recognizing that we are and can live from that abundant place. You can put your tools down. They will be there for you when you come back. After your practice, you can put your paintbrush down, and that painting, that work of art you're working on, it's still going to be there working itself in you, on you, while you're doing other things. Right. And I think that's been part of what I've been trying to live into. You started this conversation by saying, here I am, this creative hurricane, and people say, especially women, say, how do you do all this stuff? And the thing is I have a full-time job. I'm a single mom. And because of that, I have pockets where I don't have the kids, when I can kind of let loose in a different way. Yeah. But with all of it, it's giving myself permission to be present to where the oxygen flow is in that moment and going there, knowing that everything else is going to be there for me. It's not going to go anywhere. Right. Just tending a little. It's like having a garden. It's like, you do a little work over here and do a little work over there. And
I think that I'm hoping that a lot of us, just everyone, has given themselves time to think about their own self-care in whatever it is, and that provides some space. If your partner's home more because they're not at the office, well, you can go read a book for 2 hours, or you can
take a walk.
Or those little things, and taking time for yourself, because there is time, and you don't have to feel guilty about it. It actually should be prioritized in just how you look at your life holistically. So, there's certain things I'm very hopeful about, other things I'm horrified about, that where we are as a country and a community, and how
we got some work to do.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's probably some podcast episodes in there. But so you're writing. So normally with Avila, you're with your creative partner Dan and Daniel. Sorry.
Oh, he goes by Dan.
I still have his. He'll be very pleased to hear this, but I still have his. He brought the most lovely wet naps that are like.
I remember this. I forgot.
And he and I saved them because I love it so much. But he's like, come get your refreshments, and it was just a little like hand towel wipe, and there's some scent. I forget what scent it is.
That's so him. Anyway, attention to detail.
But partly because of distance and collaborative sort of things, I'm supposing that you have this own sort of singular channeling that you're doing, and it's more of a solo execution.
Yeah, and I mean, this is part of my relationship with Dan, which spans over a decade now, is that we've been able to weave together times when we collaborate on work and times when we kind of each go and do our own stuff, and he's been you think I'm a hurricane. I'm like, Dan's a whole nother level of hurricane, but he's been working on a new record. I think it's going to be a double LP. Like you do, just drop 22 songs,
Sure.
whatever.
Why not?
So he's been working on his own music, and I think in part because I was doing so much healing and connecting with my own embodiment as a woman, and just healing from heartbreak of, a year and a half ago, and just kind of gaining my sense of agency and standing to my feet in the cosmos in a way. It was just kind of like, it sounds really intense, but I think it has something to do with the age that I'm at, where it's like things are really coming together in me, around me. And so it felt right to sit down with my guitar again and just write these, kind of dreamy love songs for myself, for where I'm at, and maybe a little bit of prophetic imagination too, of recognizing the space that I'm in, the expansive place that I'm in, and the kind of love that I'm inviting into my life right now.
Yeah. Well, there are some clips on your Instagram that are really enticing and beautiful to watch and listen to, just knowing that they're these little
snippets,
little appetizers you're throwing out, but just it's more a window into your creative process and where you are. I think you lay yourself pretty bare about kind of what you're thinking or writing about. You're a fantastic writer too, by the way.
Thank you.
And I meant words, not just music, but just your how it's all channeling through is pretty amazing. But and I don't know if we should save it for another time. I know you mentioned a year and a half ago, but I don't know if you just want to sketch it for people, like just this journey you've been on through your relationship and your family, or if we just kind of pause it. And either way, I can cut this out, or we can just go, another time. But
I think what I want to say about it is that, so many of us have had this experience in love, especially as women, early on in our lives, be it because of our Christian upbringing or, just a lot of the societal patriarchal, shit that we have ingested and we're swimming in. We've had this experience in which we fall in love and fall out of ourselves, and become deeply attached with people before we really have our own center, without really having a clear sense of our own boundaried, strong selfhood. I saw a post recently, and I'm mad that I can't think of who wrote it, but she was describing this both-andness of, hey, I can be soft and strong. Right. I can have boundaries, and that doesn't mean I'm closed off. I can have important insights and not mean that I'm like an opinionated bitch because I have important insights.
Right.
And I think it's this work that we're all in, especially women, and in trying to reclaim kind of a deeper centered place from which we can then generously love, in a way in which we don't feel possessed or owned.
Yeah.
I think in my past, I've had the experience of feeling a bit like a pretty exotic bird that a man just wants to keep. And in the keeping process, there's a gilded cage. It's still a cage.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by the ways in which we talk about love. I'm a big fan of this French philosopher, Luce Irigaray, and she says that our categories and the ways in which we talk about love need to change, because the I presupposes that you know who you are. Love you supposes that you know who the you is,
right,
as opposed to having a more dynamic, expansive way of expressing love, she says, which should be I love to you. I, the unfolding mystery that I am, offer my love on this journey to you who are an unfolding mystery. That kind of dynamic spaciousness is, I think, a lot of what we're hungering for right now when we think about relationships.
And just going back and tying it back to a little bit to the religious conversation we were having, it really is an inward. You have to have the love to somebody within you. You know what I mean? And so much of our narrative is receiving this love, and I need to feel loved, and I need to, like, I'm not getting what I need love-wise, and that's a real thing. I'm not discounting it. But, like, that sort of development and confidence that you spoke about, there's a couple things. Like, I think the greatest thing, there's so many things I don't like about being 52, but I wouldn't change the confidence and sort of, like, centeredness and happiness I feel that I didn't have at 40. I didn't have it at 30.
I love hearing that because
Yeah.
I'm like, I already feel like,
Yeah.
getting to 40, I'm like, God, I feel so much more at ease in myself and clear.
Yeah, and I think it will continue. I think that's part of one of the blessings of age, especially if you're on an authentic, I hate that word, authentic, honest, earnest journey of searching that's in humility. And life will offer that to you.
Right.
Plenty. It will correct you when you're a little too far drunk on success or other things or whatever. It will... It has a way of centering, trying to get you to center, whether you are creating whether you're in front of creating that centeredness, or if you all of a sudden need to get back on the right road. But my point is that, and maybe it's just because, I don't know. I was going to make a self-deprecating joke, and I just think it's okay to say I'm happy and confident. I feel really good about the things that I can do, and my family and where that's at, and where we are. We've gone through tremendous things together, and a lot of sacrifices. Not perfectly healthy by any means.
Right.
No one is, but at the same time, it's like, man, I just think there's a lot to look forward to at your age. And the other thing I wanted to just say is, just going back, and I'm glad we're talking about it abstractly, but I think when things go bad, especially in relationships, there's too much agency given to, yes, there's a period of time where you're sort of defined by emerging from something. And that has too much power sometimes. And I think it takes a while to release it and let it go and then say, this is mine and it isn't that anymore.
Yeah.
And that, so I didn't preface that properly when I queued up the question. It's just, it's the wrong angle to take such defined parameters of, that's not what you should be focused. It isn't that. That's too much power and agency given to one person or one relationship, especially now when you are this more complete person probably than you've been and feeling all these things.
Yeah, I think, there's a period of time where we are trying on different shoes.
Yeah.
And the motivation for why we try certain shoes on is a complex thing.
Yeah.
Whether we were told that you should pick shoes like that, or whether you were in a really kind of fragile and transitional place, and so you kind of just slipped into the shoes and didn't even know how you wound up in that situation. Either way, the most important thing, I think, is finding your feet and feeling yourself, what feels best, what fits you best in your life. And I think I'm still very much in the process of discovering what partnership with the creative hurricane looks like. Because I think it's, I don't know. I think there's a lot that we need to rethink about how we relate to each other. And I'm very much enjoying this space and place of discovery. I won't be so willing again to fall out of myself. In fact, I hope I don't. I hope I'll fall in love, but I don't want to fall out of myself. I like how Brene Brown says that phrase, I won't abandon myself again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think only because of the time and space that you have now. It's, and I hope for whatever you hope for, but it's just not, it's something that you won't ever go back to that in the same capacity. You can, or in the
you
same
learn the
angle.
lessons. You take away the experience.
And you're wiser and smart. I think just my bar was so low in my 30s and 40s of just being a kind of an idiot and just going along. But you think at every point you have it figured out. So this part of me at 52 wants to go, 62 is probably pretty great too. 72 is pretty good. At least your mind and being smart and wise. There's and so many things about it.
Not giving a flying F, you know what I mean? I don't know. Yeah. We need to celebrate that more in our culture. We really do. Yeah. This aging thing is a really beautiful, wonderful, relief.
Yeah. I want to go back to the photo shoot because I really
That was so fun.
Yeah, I want to go back to the photo shoot because I want you to explain this character because on Brie's episode page, I've put a bunch of our favorite portraits from this session that we did just for the podcast. These photos will live on in your other creative spaces, but the impetus for the portrait shoot was this conversation. So tell me about this character that you sort of dreamt up and executed for our portrait shoot.
I was just thinking about so much of what we've talked about this integration of spirituality and creativity and change. And there's this fierce feminine feline energy to that I think we can all feel it culturally afoot. And I kind of just wanted to play dress up as this patron saint of all artists, muse of the mystics, and play with that iconography a little bit of the dynamism of becoming and creativity, that it's like you see a guitar, you see a paintbrush, and you don't associate with it as a flat object. You associate with the music it creates or with the shapes that the brush is going to make. And I'm so drawn to anything that moves us toward that imagination that, I kind of just started putting some things together like you do on a, Thursday, and you're like ordering things off Amazon, like, I should find a halo made out of zip ties. Like, yeah.
Well, one thing I really appreciate about you as an artist and as a person, because it really talks about you as a person and a friend, I believe now, is just like, working with your video project, which again, I'll put that on the artist page so we can look at what the song we did with Avila. But it's really about vulnerability and in projecting this vulnerability, and to really be great about even this photo shoot that we did today, to think very strategically about how you wanted to piece this wardrobe together, how you wanted to present that for the camera. This character you were thinking that came from a place from inside you and what you're feeling about nurturing and spirituality and growth and humanity. And, it really comes down to humility and also being kind of fearless. You have to, because I tell you what, most people could not put on the costume that you did and have the power. If I put it on, it would be ridiculous. Like, you know what I mean?
But see,
the embodiment of
it. I also think this is the power of community because, Brennan being here is our creative director and Angie, our makeup artist, who is both of them part of the shoot. Mm-hmm. And, feeding off each other, it's that the trust that we have in one another as a creative community is part of how we arrive at those moments of fearlessness. But it's like, I've had a couple kids and I'm like parading around in my underwear and like, these beautiful kimono robes. But I think I wanted to convey the sense of softness and vulnerability that we've been in this past year. Mm-hmm. And that was even a decision that Brennan and I made this morning where I was like, should we do this? Should we not? And in saying that out loud and saying like, but this year for all of us has been dressed down. Yeah. We've all of us like unrobed from so much. And that there was something about that tender, vulnerable place that I wanted to communicate visually. And I'm glad we did. Yeah, it was a really fantastic shoot. And especially when you articulate it in that way, I think when people see the portraits and see the series that we did, we'll be seeing much more and reading much more deeply into just maybe a nicely crafted wardrobe or a nicely crafted photograph or lighting or whatever it might be. There's a lot of layers metaphorically that we're bringing you and Brennan and everyone, Angie too, to the thing. And this is what I love about this medium that we work in is it's collaborative and it's supportive and it's in a place where you can feel safe enough to be that vulnerable, to do that. And anyway, that's also been my experience on the video project. I mean, there is not a more vulnerable narrative than was created in that. Remind me again of the name of the song. I'm so sorry. I tried, yes, which is a great. Yeah. I love that song, and where you went during that video shoot was incredible. And again, we won't break it down with words, but you can see it for yourself. And I'll embed that in your episode page as well.
What else can we cover? Because I just think, is there anything missing? Because I feel like we should kind of wrap on that photo shoot, but also I don't want to leave anything out.
I think we got it. I mean, unless there's anything else that you can think of, but...
Well, I could talk to you
we talked about love,
everything. Spain.
Spirituality, Spain, creativity. I think I was pretty epic.
It was pretty good for
good.
An hour and 8 minutes now at this point.
Awesome.
So, but anyway, I thank you for inviting me to your creative process over the years. I can't wait to work with you again over the years. What am I saying? Well,
It has been 2 years. It has been 2 years now.
Wow.
You can say that with integrity.
Anyway, just about how good things happen in a row when you say yes to things.
Yeah.
Meaning I'm speaking about myself, is I met Brennan, and now Brennan's worked on some major commercial client set building and things. And so without that introduction to her via your your music video.
Right. The way that these things work together is part of the beauty and what inspires me so much. Yeah. But I'm so deeply inspired by you.
We got to this point without saying alchemy.
How is that possible?
We got to redo it. We got to redo the whole thing.
So the alchemy of this situation. No, but in all honesty, Brian, I think I'm so inspired by you and the creative capacity that you have to execute these wild ideas and even take them so much further. I mean, I think that was the gift of being able to work with this community on the music video shoot too. Mm-hmm. Was like I came with these, ideas, but then Brennan made these insane costumes, and then the way that you lit it and the story you told and the angles that you set up. I mean, it made it what it was. And so I think this is the greatest privilege for me of being in any creative field is the creative collaboration and the community. Yeah. And the amount of love. I mean, I was so excited to come here today. I told my kids yesterday, and I was like, I think I'm going to pee myself. Like, I'm so excited. And genuinely was 99% of that was just seeing you, just to be able to be back in the space and feel that kind of creative, play again.
Yeah, it was a blast. And I think part of what I try to do is just receive the person, the subject, right? And receive whatever their vision is and then work around I'm the 10% around the edges. It's 90%.
You're way too humble about that.
So what did you call, I'm a mystic in my own way. Mm-hmm. I'm on the 10%.
You are.
I'm going to cut that out because that sounded very arrogant. That's not what I meant. I'm
actually,
only 10% of the process.
You have to keep it. And I mean that because
I'm not a mystic. I'm just saying that.
No, I actually think this would be a really good way for people to reframe for themselves. Whatever it is that you're doing, you can be a mystic in what you're doing, just depending on the energy that you bring to it.
Yeah. Well, and everyone has a role. So everyone's a role. And I think my role is to give you the space to find the spot that works visually and working collaboratively to get to that point. And I certainly don't do it by myself. Mm-hmm. When I get moments like today and this coming in where I just have to listen and respond visually to things is such a joy. So anyway, I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see what happens with your podcast, this new album.
You. Yeah.
I'm sure when this comes out, it'll change your life.
We're going to be playing a lot more in the future, of course. But
that'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right, Brie, thanks so much. I can't wait. I can't wait to share these photos. So,
me too. Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Love that conversation with Brie. What an awesome person. So creatively talented. Please check out fullexposurepodcast.com/Brie to see the photos that we created together, see her music videos. I've posted 2 of them. She's a real force, and I cannot wait for her podcast to come out because I think she's going to have an amazing audience and a lot of reach with her platform, with all the things she's interested in. So that's awesome. Hey, my special thanks again to Metro Health University, Michigan Health, and Dr. Peter Hahn. They are such great and generous supporters of this podcast. So if you are thinking about medical care in any way, different family physician or provider, healthcare provider of any type, check out Metro Health. They're amazing. All right, everybody. Have a fantastic week. I just can't wait to go get it, so you get it too. All right? Take care. The Full Exposure Podcast is brought to you by Metro Health, University of Michigan Health, and Dr. Peter Hahn, in appreciation of the creative and artistic visionaries who enrich our lives through cultural connections.